The most dangerous people in a family are never the ones who scream the loudest. They're the ones who smile while everyone else destroys each other. The first time I realized something was wrong inside the Harrison family was during a Sunday dinner in October, 3 years after Thomas Harrison died. Rain pressed softly against the tall dining room windows while the chandelier cast a warm golden light across the long oak table that had seated 4 generations of the family. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Crystal glasses, silverware polished so clean it reflected the candlelight. Expensive wine breathing quietly beside Isabel's elbow. But old money families rarely fall apart in public. They decay slowly behind closed doors, one quiet betrayal at a time. I sat at the far end of the table wearing the same faded denim jacket Victoria once mocked me for wearing near her guests. She said I looked like a mechanic who wandered into the wrong house. Maybe she was right. I never belonged there the way the others did. David barely touched his steak that night. His eyes looked hollow, exhausted, like a man carrying invisible weight on his shoulders. Isabel sat beside him in a cream silk blouse, pouring wine with graceful hands while pretending not to notice how tense everyone had become. She had a way of controlling a room without raising her voice. Eleanor stayed unusually quiet beneath the chandelier, carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone. Even James, the old family butler who had worked there nearly 30 years, moved through the room like he was afraid to interrupt something fragile. Then Ethan spoke. Why was the trust account changed again? The room froze. David rubbed his forehead immediately. Victoria sighed dramatically before taking a sip of wine. Isabel smiled softly, almost amused. Sweetheart, she said gently, your father already explained that. No, Ethan replied. He didn't. Silence settled over the dining room again, and that was when I noticed it. Isabel's eyes moved across the table before anyone answered. Just for a second. One quick glance toward Victoria, another toward David. Tiny movements, barely visible. But somehow, after that look, everyone started arguing exactly the way she needed them to. Victoria blamed Ethan for being disrespectful. David snapped at his son. Eleanor stared at her plate. Isabel never raised her voice once. She simply poured more wine and watched the family slowly turn against itself. And in that moment, sitting beneath the old chandelier while rain rolled down the windows behind us, I realized something that chilled me far more than the storm outside. Someone inside that house was carefully manipulating the entire family from the shadows. And I was starting to believe it was the woman smiling at the center of the table. The argument at dinner should have ended after dessert, but tension inside Harrison Manor had a way of lingering long after people stopped talking. By 10:30 that night, most of the lights downstairs had been turned off except for the wall sconces near the staircase and the fireplace room beside the library. Rain still tapped softly against the windows while the old grandfather clock echoed through the hallway every 15 minutes like a warning nobody wanted to hear. I was halfway through pouring myself coffee in the kitchen when James appeared beside the doorway carrying a silver tray he no longer needed. You should not stay too long tonight, Harrison, he said quietly without looking directly at me. I studied him for a moment. James had worked for the Harrisons since David was a teenager. In all the years I had known him, I had never once seen that man nervous. Something happened in this house long before I got here, I told him. You can feel it. James lowered his voice even further. This house changed after Isabel moved in. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed from the second-floor balcony. Victoria descended the staircase slowly, still dressed in dark silk despite the late hour. She stopped halfway down and looked directly at me with the same expression wealthy people reserve for stains they cannot remove. Still here? She asked coldly. I assumed the dinner made it obvious you were not welcome. James immediately stepped back into silence. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Ethan asked a fair question. Tonight. Victoria laughed softly under her breath. Ethan is young enough to still believe honesty matters in this family. Then her eyes narrowed slightly. You should be careful filling his head with suspicions. She walked away before I could answer, disappearing toward the east wing where the private bedrooms overlooked the gardens. A few seconds later, I noticed Isabel standing near the upstairs hallway in complete silence. She had been there long enough to hear everything. But instead of reacting, she simply smiled at me with that same calm expression she always wore at dinner parties and charity events. It was the kind of smile that revealed absolutely nothing. Then she disappeared into David's office without a sound. Around midnight, Ethan found me near the library. "Did you notice something strange tonight too?" he whispered. I nodded slowly. Ethan glanced toward the hallway before speaking again. "My grandfather's old financial files are missing. Dad said Thomas moved them months ago, but I checked his office last week. The cabinet was still full. And now?" I asked. "Empty." The chandelier lights reflected faintly across the polished floor between us. Somewhere upstairs, a door closed softly. Ethan swallowed hard before lowering his voice even further. "I think somebody inside this house is making everyone distrust each other on purpose." And deep down, I was starting to fear he was right. The next morning, Harrison Manor looked beautiful in the cold gray light of early autumn, but the silence inside the house felt heavier than it had the night before. David was already awake when I walked into the breakfast room around 7. He sat alone near the bay windows wearing the same dark suit from dinner, staring into a cup of coffee that had gone cold long ago. The television mounted above the fireplace played financial news quietly in the background, but I could tell he was not listening to any of it. He looked exhausted in a way sleep could not fix. "You should eat something," I told him as I sat across from him. David gave a tired smile without lifting his eyes. Is that concern or pity? Maybe both. For a second, I thought he might actually laugh, but instead he rubbed his face slowly like a man trying to stay awake after several sleepless nights. "Do you ever feel like everybody in this house expects something from you all the time?" he asked quietly. "Every phone call, every meeting, every dinner. It never stops." Before I could answer, Isabel entered the room carrying a tablet and a folder tucked neatly beneath her arm. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, and somehow she looked completely calm while the rest of the family seemed to be unraveling around her. "There you are," she said gently to David. "Your 10 o'clock call with New York was moved up. Thomas also left another message about the trust paperwork." David closed his eyes for a moment. "I cannot deal with that this morning." Isabel rested a hand lightly on his shoulder. "That is why I handle these things for you." The words sounded caring, supportive, but something about the way David immediately fell silent afterward unsettled me. It was not comfort I saw in his face. It was surrender. Later that afternoon, Ethan found me in the library while rain drifted softly outside the tall windows again. He carried a stack of printed bank statements and shaking hands. "Look at these dates," he whispered. Several transfers had been made from one of the Harrison investment accounts over the last 18 months. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Consulting fees, legal restructuring expenses, international account movements. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger alarms individually, but together they painted a very different picture. "Who approved them?" I asked. Ethan swallowed hard. "According to the records, Dad did." "And you do not believe he did?" Ethan looked upstairs toward the second-floor hallway before lowering his voice even further. "My father barely reads half the documents put in front of him anymore." At that exact moment, Isabel appeared in the doorway holding David's medication bottle in one hand. She smiled warmly at Ethan first, then at me. "I was wondering where everyone disappeared to," she said softly. But her eyes moved briefly toward the papers in Ethan's hands before she smiled again. And somehow, that frightened me more than anger ever could. By Thursday evening, the atmosphere inside Harrison Manor had shifted into something colder and far more dangerous than ordinary family tension. Nobody argued openly anymore. Instead, conversations stopped the second another person entered the room. Doors closed softly when footsteps approached. Even the staff moved quietly through the hallways like they were trying not to disturb something unstable beneath the surface. Ethan stopped me outside the study just after sunset. "You need to see this," he whispered. He led me upstairs toward Thomas Harrison's old office near the West Wing staircase, the part of the house nobody used much anymore since Thomas passed away. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and old leather books, and the only light came from small brass fixtures mounted along the walls. Ethan unlocked the office door carefully before stepping inside. The room looked untouched at first glance. Shelves filled with legal records, framed photographs of past family vacations, a large mahogany desk facing the fireplace. But Ethan walked directly toward the filing cabinet beside the windows and opened the bottom drawer. "Empty. This entire section used to contain trust documents," he said quietly. "I checked myself 2 weeks ago." I studied the cabinet more closely. Fresh scratch marks surrounded the lock mechanism. Somebody had forced it open recently. Did your father know? I asked. Ethan shook his head slowly. Dad barely comes into this room anymore. Thunder rolled softly outside while rain streaked across the windows overlooking the estate gardens. As Ethan searched through the remaining folders, I noticed something else. One of the framed family photographs near the fireplace sat crooked on the shelf. When I lifted it slightly, a folded piece of paper slid loose behind it. It was an old handwritten note from Thomas Harrison himself. Meet Sophia Bennett privately. Do not discuss with Isabel. Ethan stared at the note in silence. Who is Sophia Bennett? He asked. Before I could answer, the office door opened suddenly behind us. Eleanor stood there clutching the edge of her pastel cardigan tightly. Around herself, her silver curls looked slightly disheveled, and for the first time since I arrived at Harrison Manor, she looked genuinely frightened. You boys need to stop digging into things that do not concern you, she whispered. Ethan stepped toward her immediately. Grandma, somebody is hiding financial records. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly before speaking again. This family survived for decades because people knew when to stay silent. Silent about what? I asked carefully. Eleanor looked toward Thomas's empty chair near the fireplace, and something in her expression changed completely. It was not anger. It was guilt. Your grandfather stopped trusting people near the end, she said quietly to Ethan, especially after Isabel became involved in the business accounts. The room fell silent except for rain tapping against the windows. Ethan stared at his grandmother in disbelief. You think Isabel had something to do with the missing files? Eleanor hesitated too long before answering, and that hesitation told me more than words ever could. After Eleanor left Thomas's office that night, neither Ethan nor I spoke for nearly a minute. The rain outside had become heavier, drumming softly against the old windows while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hills surrounding the estate. Ethan finally sat down in Thomas Harrison's leather chair and stared at the handwritten note again. Grandpa trusted somebody named Sophia Bennett more than his own family, he said quietly. That does not make sense. But the longer I stayed inside Harrison Manor, the more I realized very little inside that family made sense anymore. The next afternoon, I drove Ethan into town to meet Sophia Bennett at a small law office nearly 20 miles from the estate. Unlike the polished corporate firms David usually worked with, Sophia's office sat above an old brick bookstore on Main Street. The place smelled faintly of coffee and paper instead of polished marble and money. Sophia looked younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled neatly back and tired eyes that suggested she had not slept much lately either. The moment Ethan mentioned Thomas Harrison's name, her expression changed completely. I wondered how long it would take before someone came asking questions, she said carefully after locking the office door behind us. Ethan leaned forward immediately. Did my grandfather think somebody was stealing from the family? Sophia hesitated before answering. Your grandfather believed somebody was restructuring control of the family assets very slowly over time. She opened a folder on her desk and slid several copied documents toward us. International transfers, revised trust amendments, property adjustments hidden inside routine legal filings. Every single document carried David's signature. Ethan looked stunned. My father would never agree to this. Sophia folded her hands calmly. I do not think he understood what he was signing most of the time. A cold silence settled over the room. Then Sophia lowered her voice. Thomas became concerned after Isabel started handling more of David's business schedules and personal paperwork. He said David stopped making independent decisions shortly after. Ethan shook his head slowly like he was trying to reject the idea completely. She is his wife. Yes, Sophia replied softly. And that is exactly why nobody questioned her access. When we returned to Harrison Manor later that evening, the entire house felt strangely tense again. Victoria and Eleanor were arguing quietly near the staircase, while David stood motionless beside the fireplace, holding a glass of whiskey he barely touched. Isabel remained perfectly calm in the center of it all, listening gently to everyone while somehow making each person feel understood. That was the frightening part. She never appeared controlling. She appeared helpful, caring, reasonable. But as I watched the family fracture more each day beneath the warm chandelier light of that old dining room, I began to understand something deeply unsettling. The most dangerous manipulators are never the loudest people in the room. They are the ones who make everybody believe the destruction was their own idea. By the following week, Harrison Manor no longer felt like a family home. It felt like a courtroom where nobody trusted the person sitting beside them. Breakfast conversations ended in silence. Small misunderstandings turned into arguments within minutes. Even Eleanor stopped attending dinner some nights, claiming headaches while remaining upstairs in her bedroom overlooking the gardens. But the strangest change of all was David. He looked thinner every day. His suits hung looser around his shoulders, and dark circles beneath his eyes made him appear 10 years older than he actually was. One rainy afternoon, I found him alone in the library staring at the fireplace while an untouched glass of bourbon rested beside him. The room smelled faintly of smoke and old paper, and the only sound came from rain tapping gently against the tall windows. "You ever feel like you were losing your own mind?" David asked quietly without looking at me. I sat across from him slowly, more often than I would like. He gave a weak smile before rubbing his forehead again. "I cannot remember the last month clearly anymore. Meetings, calls, contracts. Every day feels blurred together." His voice dropped lower. "Sometimes Isabel tells me conversations happen that I honestly cannot remember having." A cold feeling settled in my chest immediately. "And you trust that?" David hesitated too long before answering. "She handles everything for me now." Upstairs, footsteps crossed the hallway above us. David looked toward the ceiling automatically, almost nervously. Then he lowered his voice even further. "My mother thinks Ethan is hiding financial information from the family. Ethan thinks Victoria is moving money through the trust. Eleanor barely speaks to anyone anymore. And somehow Isabel is the only person everybody still talks to." Before I could respond, the library doors opened softly. Isabel entered carrying David's medication organizer and a folder of documents pressed neatly against her chest. "There you are," she said warmly. Thomas called again about the revised trust paperwork. David immediately looked exhausted again. "Can this wait until tomorrow?" Isabel walked toward him slowly and rested the folder beside his drink. "It already has waited too long." Her tone remained gentle, but something about the way David instantly fell silent unsettled me deeply. He did not look like a husband disagreeing with his wife. He looked like a man who no longer trusted his own judgment. Later that night, Ethan knocked quietly on my bedroom door, holding a laptop beneath his arm. "I found another account," he whispered. We sat together near the window while storm clouds rolled over the estate outside. Ethan pulled up transaction records connected to a private offshore holding company registered less than 2 years earlier. The authorized signatures listed David Harrison as primary approval. But one detail immediately caught my attention. Every approval timestamp matched periods when David had been traveling, medicated, or recovering from stress-related exhaustion. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. "You think somebody used my father without him realizing it?" I looked toward the dark hallway outside my bedroom door before answering quietly. "No, I think somebody made him dependent first." 3 nights later, James knocked quietly on my bedroom door just after midnight. The hallway outside remained dark except for a single wall lamp near the staircase, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors of Harrison Manor. "Come with me," he whispered carefully, "and do not let anyone see you." I followed him downstairs through the silent east wing while the old house groaned softly beneath the storm outside. Rain battered the windows harder than before, and distant thunder rolled across the hills surrounding the estate. James carried an old brass key in one trembling hand as he led me toward the fireplace room beside the unused wine cellar. Thomas trusted very few people near the end, James said quietly while unlocking a narrow wooden door hidden behind a bookshelf panel. But he trusted me enough to keep something safe. Inside the hidden storage room, dust covered nearly everything. Old account ledgers, framed family photographs, boxes stacked beneath ceiling pipes that rattled softly whenever thunder shook the house. James knelt beside a small iron chest tucked beneath a blanket and opened it carefully. Inside sat several cassette tapes, folders filled with handwritten notes, and a digital recorder sealed inside a plastic bag. My stomach tightened immediately. "What is all this?" I asked. James looked exhausted. "Insurance." Before I could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway behind us wearing a dark sweatshirt and carrying his laptop beneath one arm. "I saw you both leave upstairs," he whispered. James hesitated briefly before handing him one of the folders. Ethan opened it slowly, and the color drained from his face almost immediately. These are family meeting transcripts, he said quietly. Private conversations. Several pages contain notes Thomas Harrison personally dictated during confidential business meetings over the last 3 years. Names, financial transfers, legal concerns. But one detail appeared again and again beside nearly every entry. Isabel advised against informing the family. Isabel requested document revisions. Isabel handled communication privately. Ethan picked up the digital recorder next. Does this still work? James nodded once. Ethan pressed play carefully. Static crackled through the speaker before Thomas Harrison's tired voice filled the small room. If anything happens to me, somebody needs to know David is no longer making independent decisions. Ethan froze completely. Thomas continued speaking in the recording. She isolates him slowly. Then she controls the information around him. Nobody notices because she never appears aggressive. A long silence followed before Thomas spoke again in a lower voice. The family believes Isabel is protecting them, but I am beginning to fear she is positioning herself to control everything after I am gone. Ethan lowered the recorder slowly with shaking hands. For several seconds, nobody inside that hidden room spoke at all. Then James looked directly at me. Thomas tried confronting Eleanor about this before he died, he said quietly. But Eleanor was too afraid the truth would destroy the family. Thunder shook the house again overhead. And for the first time since arriving at Harrison Manor, I finally understood the terrifying reality none of them wanted to admit. This family was not collapsing by accident. Somebody had been carefully dismantling it piece by piece for years. The final dinner happened on a Sunday night exactly 1 week before the annual Harrison Foundation Gala, the kind of event where wealthy families pretend their lives are perfect beneath crystal chandeliers and expensive smiles. But by then, Harrison Manor no longer felt stable enough to survive another week of secrets. Rain poured heavily outside while lightning flashed beyond the tall dining room windows, illuminating the long oak table where the entire family had gathered once again. David looked exhausted before dinner even started. Victoria sat rigidly near the center of the table with a glass of untouched wine in front of her. Eleanor barely raised her eyes from her plate. Ethan remained tense beside me, his jaw clenched tightly beneath the warm chandelier light. Isabel, however, looked calm as ever. Elegant, composed, untouchable. She poured wine slowly for David before smiling gently toward Eleanor. "You hardly ate all day," she said softly. "You should take better care of yourself." It sounded caring to anyone listening casually. But after everything we had discovered, I finally heard something else hidden beneath her words. Control. Quiet control wrapped inside kindness. Halfway through dinner, Ethan suddenly pushed his chair back from the table. "We need to stop pretending nothing is happening," he said firmly. The room froze instantly. Victoria sighed dramatically. "Not this again." But Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and placed several printed financial statements onto the table beside Thomas Harrison's old seat. "These transfers came from offshore accounts connected to family assets," he said. "And they all happened after Grandpa died." David stared down at the papers in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Isabel remained perfectly still beside him. "Ethan," she said gently, "your father is already under enough stress." "That is exactly the problem," Ethan replied sharply. "Everybody keeps treating him like he cannot think for himself anymore." Silence crashed over the dining room again. Rain hammered against the windows while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the estate grounds. Then I reached into my coat pocket and placed the digital recorder beside the center candle arrangement. Isabel's expression changed for the first time since I met her. Only slightly, but enough. "What is that?" Victoria asked nervously. I pressed play without answering. Thomas Harrison's voice filled the dining room almost immediately. "If anything happens to me, somebody needs to know David is no longer making independent decisions." Eleanor covered her mouth instantly. David looked completely frozen. Thomas continued speaking through the recorder while nobody at the table moved at all. She isolates him slowly. Then she controls the information around him. Isabel finally stood up from her chair. "This is ridiculous," she said calmly. Thomas was old and paranoid near the end. But then another recording played. This time Thomas mentioned missing trust documents, revised signatures, private legal transfers. Isabel's calm expression slowly disappeared beneath the chandelier light while the family stared at her in complete silence. David looked at his wife like he no longer recognized the person sitting beside him. Eleanor began quietly crying into her napkin. Even Victoria seemed unable to speak. And for the first time since arriving at Harrison Manor, the illusion holding that family together finally shattered in front of everyone. The morning after the dinner felt unnaturally quiet inside Harrison Manor. No one gathered for breakfast. No voices echoed through the hallways. Even the staff moved carefully, as though the house itself might collapse if somebody spoke too loudly. Rain had finally stopped sometime before sunrise, leaving the estate wrapped in cold gray fog that drifted across the gardens outside the tall windows. David was the first person I saw that morning. He stood alone near the front entrance wearing a dark overcoat, while several suitcases rested beside the staircase. For a moment, he looked like a stranger inside his own home. "I booked a hotel downtown," he said quietly before I could ask anything. His voice sounded hollow, exhausted beyond words. "I need time to think away from this place." Behind him, the massive chandelier above the foyer glowed softly against the marble floors where generations of Harrisons once welcomed guests, celebrated holidays, and posed for photographs pretending they were happy. Now the house only felt empty. Ethan appeared at the top of the staircase, watching his father silently. Neither of them seemed to know what to say anymore. That was the cruelest part about betrayal inside families. Even after the truth comes out, the damage does not disappear. It simply changes shape. Around noon, Eleanor finally came downstairs wearing the same pale cardigan from the night before. She looked older somehow, smaller than she once had. James helped her into the fireplace room while she held a cup of tea with trembling hands. "Thomas tried warning me," she admitted quietly without looking at anyone directly. "But I convinced myself keeping the peace mattered more than confronting the truth." Her eyes filled with tears as she stared into the fire. "I thought silence would protect this family." Nobody answered because deep down, we all knew silence was exactly what destroyed it. Victoria locked herself inside her private suite most of the day. The only person she agreed to speak with was her attorney. By evening, rumors had already started spreading through their social circles about frozen accounts, legal reviews, and missing trust approvals. Harrison Manor no longer represented stability and prestige. It had become another wealthy family collapsing beneath the weight of secrets nobody addressed soon enough. Isabel left shortly before sunset. No dramatic goodbye, no screaming argument. She simply walked through the front doors carrying 2 designer bags while a black sedan waited outside near the fountain. For the first time since I met her, she looked unsettled. Not defeated, just exposed. David never came downstairs to watch her leave. None of us did. Later that night, Ethan and I stood alone inside the dining room beneath the chandelier where everything had finally fallen apart. The long oak table remained untouched from dinner, wine glasses still sitting where people abandoned them hours earlier. Ethan stared at the empty chairs quietly before speaking. "Do you think Grandpa knew this family was already broken?" I looked around the silent room one last time before answering. "I think he knew families do not fall apart because of money." Ethan glanced toward me carefully. "Then why do they fall apart?" Outside, cold wind moved through the dark trees surrounding Harrison Manor while the old house settled quietly around us. "Because people stop trusting each other," I said softly. "And once that happens, even love starts feeling dangerous."